So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having people here. We have 25 people. This is great from all over ASEAN. It's wonderful to be here with everyone and the 2024 AUN-EEC Conference on Ecological Education and Culture with a theme this year for rewilding the city. Yay, I'm also gonna try this thing. Oh, yeah. So we're here in parallel session 1 for ecological issues in the city with me, Sindhurianti Priyadi, as Associate Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, Universitas Indonesia. So we will have around 9 people presenting today with various themes. And we all look forward to your presentation. And if you're not presenting, please stay active in this parallel session by sending out comments, also questions right in the chat room. And I'll be reading them out, especially the questions during the Q&A session. As well, if we have more questions than time, we will be sure to send out these questions to the speaker, which then they can help respond to after the parallel session. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Maria Luz Vilches, Vice President for Higher Education from Ateneo de Manila University, to give the welcome.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ateneo de Manila University, and welcome to the AUN-EEC conference. EEC meaning Ecological Education and Culture. And this conference is jointly organized by the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability and the Sustainable City and Urban Development of the Universitas Indonesia. I like the theme of the conference, rewilding the city. I think when we look at the city, when we think of a city, it's always a paradise for a lot of people who don't live in the city. It's always a dream to live in the city, but in this increasing number of issues that relate to climate change, the city doesn't seem to be a palatable idea anymore to a whole lot of people. It's wild in itself, but wild in a negative sense, because especially here in the Philippines, when you go through EDSA, that huge highway there, and then you cannot get through the thicket of traffic and the pollution, you feel as if, oh my goodness, how wild this is. But that's not the kind of rewilding that you intend to do. So I'm very taken by that, because it reverses the idea of wild in negative sense to make it wild in the positive sense. And I hope that your exchange of ideas will be fruitful, will be engaging, and I'm very much looking forward to proposals on how to rewild the city. We need that before it's too late. So I wish you all the best in your exchange of ideas, and I hope that we can combat this kind of difficulty in our environment so that we can progress in our taking care of our common home. All the very best to you. Enjoy the conference, enjoy the friendships, and enjoy Ateneo de Manila and all the people that are going to receive you here for this kind of experience. Enjoy the adventure. I'd like to thank Eman de Locado and all the members of his team and all the other members of the team of Universitas Indonesia for putting together this lovely conference with an enticing theme. All the very best, and ad maiorem Dei gloriam, as we say it here in Ateneo de Manila, all for the glory of God. Take good care.
Great. Thank you, Vice President of Ateneo de Manila University, for giving the welcoming remarks with this exciting theme. And with that, we commence part one of the paper presentation. So I'd like to invite Erica Renee Langit from the Department of Community and Environmental Resources Planning from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, with the theme Acceptability Study of Proposed Congestion Charging System in the Central Business District of Baguio City. So, Erica, I think you're on.
Good afternoon, Doc Cindy.
Um,
Okay. Am I audible to everyone in the audience?
yes.
Okay. Thank you. I will begin my presentation. Good afternoon. I am Erica Renee Langit, a planning assistant of the Technical Assistance Program on Human Settlements Planning of the Department of Community and Environmental Resource Planning of the College of Human Ecology of University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Today, I will be presenting the acceptability study of proposed congestion charging system in the Central Business District of Baguio City. Next slide, please. Baguio City is a famous tourist attraction in northern Luzon, a hotspot of culture and the arts, and has a cool climate relative to other cities in the Philippines. One of the most pressing urban challenges in the city is traffic congestion, especially in its major thoroughfares, which can be found in the Central Business District, as this is aggravated by not only commercial and institutional activity, but difficulties as well in limiting vehicles in the CBD. Next slide. Since 2017, the government has been considering congestion charging. There were proposed ordinances on collecting fees from only tourists and specific vehicles. And in May 2023, a proposed joint venture with the city government of Baguio was submitted by the Metro Pacific Tollways Corporations regarding the implementation of the congestion charging system, which will integrate the use of modern technology. The map on the slide shows the recommended congestion charging zones based on the feasibility done by the MPTC. Next slide, please. Transportation demand management is an intervention to modify travel decisions, aiming for impacts of travel to be reduced, such as traffic. A type of TDM is congestion charging, an economic measure to charge vehicles in a specific zone and time, usually peak hours, in order to reduce the number of cars in an area. Next slide. This has been successfully implemented in European countries and in Asia, specifically in Singapore. However, there are still cases of failed trials prior its implementation. Next slide. Crucial for the implementation of such policies, and in the case of congestion charging, is public acceptability. Recent studies states that the higher public acceptability will lead to an easier legislation and implementation. A low acceptance was seen in the previous rerouting scheme ordinance, which was negatively perceived by Baguio City residents because of the noise, which was not expected by them during its implementation. Next slide. This study determined the acceptability of Baguio City residents on the congestion charging system in the CBD, specifically identified the factors that influence their acceptability, determined the significant difference on the acceptability between different road users, and provided recommendations on transportation policy planning in the CBD of Baguio City. Next slide, please. This study employed an exploratory sequential mixed method design. And next slide. Various data analysis were used, such as descriptive statistics and ANOVA. Next slide, please. Should I go on po? Okay po. Generally, the system is slightly unacceptable to the residents. This level of non-acceptance was similar in countries such as Taiwan, Beijing, Shanghai, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and the Netherlands. Its general acceptability is influenced by the following factors. Next slide, please. The variables in the theoretical framework of urban transport pricing acceptability was used in determining the factors of acceptability. The following factors reduces acceptability. Firstly is the information and awareness. Studies indicates that this is a key barrier to its implementation. Most of the respondents heard nothing at all regarding the charging system, and for those that somewhat know little about it, only through social media and the news. A 2010 and 2015 analysis emphasizes that those with inadequate information on the congestion charging scheme would be more negative compared to well-informed individuals. Next slide, please. Second is the perceived effectiveness, one of the important factors for residents to oppose the congestion charge. The strategy is perceived to be less effective in the reduction of the amount of traffic. Uncertainty and skepticism, specifically on its benefits, is often a reason for opposing the scheme, according to Gu et al. 2018 and Hamilton et al. 2014. Next slide. Revenue allocation. So firstly, the preferred amount of congestion fee is 5 pesos to 30 pesos and was followed by the next cheapest option, 35 to 60 pesos. So a study of the City Engineering Office in 2023 showed similar results with the 35 pesos to the 60 pesos option. However, if this is imposed, this will not significantly lead to traffic volume reduction and will only be a simple income generating instead of its intended purpose. And this is also similar to the polluter pays principle and willingness to pay to compensate for the costs associated with the elimination of the risk of environmental pollution. However, in this case, respondents seek immediate compensation without the full elimination of the identified problem. Next slide, please. And on the preferred venue of allocation, most of our respondents strongly agrees that the funds to be spent for improving public transportation quality, and it's also expressed in the other options. So how this factor can lead to acceptability is, according to studies, their perceived advantageous allocation of the respondents can lead to an increase of acceptability of the congestion charging system. Next slide, please. For acceptability among our different road users, there is no significant difference in the acceptability of different road users and its corresponding factors. Unlike previous and recent studies showing significant difference among road users, wherein a high likelihood of acceptability is seen in non-car users, unlike car users. And next slide, please. So lastly, for based on the resident acceptability of the following transportation policy planning recommendations are recommended. So firstly, the policy packaging. So along with the congestion charging system, this can be packaged with the improvement of public transportation in the city. And second is with park and ride facilities. Second is the trial pilot congestion charge deployment. And next slide, please. The following are measures to convince the residents through an improved information, education, and communication campaign. Second are information desk in barangays and the transparency of revenue allocation and management. Next slide, please. So public acceptability is crucial to be accurately measured and understood prior any implementation of policies. And for our policymakers in making sounder and more effective strategies to promote congestion charge, which potentially can increase familiarity, and residents are more willing in accepting the proposed congestion charging system. Next slide. Ayan. Thank you very much for listening to my discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica, for your presentation. I would like to open the floor for questions, please. Yeah, thank you, Jet, for your appreciation. So I would like to open the floor for question and answer. You can ask them directly, or you can also post them in the chat. So, okay, maybe before any questions from the attendees, I would like to ask, so in your list, I didn't see any Filipino cities. Has this policy been implemented in other cities?
No, it has not. been implemented, and I believe in around Manila, I think it was considered as well to be implemented. But I believe Baguio City is one of the cities in the Philippines that is really considering to push through with the congestion charging system, as they have this smart city initiative and would like to incorporate the congestion charging system in this initiative.
Okay, but have you heard of other cities that may have probably started to implement to plan, but then because it was a low acceptability, for example, then it didn't continue?
I have researched that as well for actually this is my undergraduate thesis. So I've researched that and there is no studies yet in
Mm.
other cities in the Philippines.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, quite a bold move for a touristic city, because usually tourist city, they often aim to be very tourist oriented, in a sense that if the tourist wants cars, then they will uh yeah, allow cars. So yeah, I think that's a really good initiative from the government. Okay, I would like to there is a question from Zenaida Bawanan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So what is the profile of the respondents, and were they residents or tourists? Yeah, I think that's a good question.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zenaida, for the question. All of my respondents are residents of Baguio City. I was able to release my survey questionnaire to 107 residents of the city. So I was not able to put in my presentation, but most of my respondents come from Irisan. If you are a Baguio City resident, I had almost 25 respondents from Irisan. And my study was only directed to residents and not tourists, as that will really affect my my results of my study if I incorporated tourists in the mix.
Okay, and that's I think continuing question is, how was it conducted? Was it facilitated, the survey?
Oh yes, I only due to the limited time that I had as an individual researcher in UP Las Bañas, we have individual thesis. So I only through convenience sampling, so I released this Google Forms through several social media accounts to help me get the 107 residents.
Okay. So you didn't go like in the streets and
Yes,
approach
yes.
people. Okay.
Sadly, it was already Christmas season in Baguio City, so there were a lot of tourists. So I wouldn't know if they were residents.
Oh yes, I think that's a good reason. So there's a Baguio resident actually here, Ronnie Kalugay, and how does this operate? Especially is the charging entry, is it the charging entry? Yeah.
Yes. Earlier in my slides, there was this map proposed. There were 12 charging zones along around the central business district. So, once entered during peak hours. So we have peak hours during the morning through 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. I know 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I believe, according to the city engineering office, and during the afternoon from 4 o'clock. From 5 o'clock to 6 p.m. They haven't finalized it yet, the city engineering office, when I returned to submit my thesis. So I'm not sure if they have really pushed through with the final congestion charging zones and the final time for the collection during peak hours, as I also tried to contact them, but they weren't able to reach me again for further updates on the congestion charging system.
Okay. I think we might have time for a last question. So you had a list of like all the cities that have implemented this. I think there's Hong Kong, London.
Yes.
Yeah. How much was it successful? Like how many percent was congestion reduced?
Mm-mm. Actually, I think I believe that basing on the research I had before as well, in Stockholm and in London, it was very successful. Around I think 30%, I'm sorry if I don't have any references, but 30% for congestion was reduced. However, until now, there are still negative perception from the residents regarding the congestion fee. So the city of Baguio, in our case, is we are already denoted as the city of fines because a lot of fees are collected once entered through the city. So I do hope, as a resident as well of Baguio City, that other means of reducing traffic is also addressed by our city government. Thank you very much for all the
Okay.
questions.
Thank you, Erica, for your presentation and your very nice response. Looking forward to the implementation in Baguio City, if that's the best policy. So we'll move to the next speaker, Abigail Garino. I think she's already got the video on, from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, from the Biodiversity Research Laboratory, Institute of Biology. So you have 10 minutes, Ms. Abigail, and over to you.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Abigail Garino, and I'm a University Research Associate at the Institute of Biology in UP Diliman. So today I'm going to talk about something that is close to my heart, which is the role of Arboretum and how they protect our forests and native plants. So this is going to be the overview or my presentation flow. I'm going to do a brief introduction about our Arboretum and the different forest formations that have been depicted there, and how we do public engagement and what is our role in conservation of native plants. So whenever I start our tour, this is what welcomes our joiners. In this space, I ask the joiners, can you give me 5 animals? And in the snap, they are able to give me different names of of animals. They're very confident. Philippine eagle, serpent eagle, snakes, lions, tigers. And now I proceed to the next question. Now, can you give me 5 plants? And somehow this is where the story deviates, because not all of the joiners, not many of them can name plants. And I start to ask them, have you eaten rice? Because as Filipinos, rice is a staple. And a lot of them raises their hands. And then I proceed questioning, have you eaten vegetable today or this week? And they started raising their hands, making them realize that plants are a part of their everyday life. However, this is an illustration of what we call plant blindness, and our arboretum is in place to cure this disease. So, as an introduction, our arboretum was established in December of 2014. We're turning 10 this year. It houses 72 premium timber species, and it functions as a living laboratory. So, this is a map showing our arboretum. So this is where we start. This is the Institute of Biology, and this is where the tour normally starts. Now, in our arboretum, we have 5 different forest formations, in contrast to the 12 forest formations that exist in the Philippines. We have tropical lowland evergreen, also called your dipterocarp forest. We also have the tropical semi-evergreen, the tropical lower montane forest, and the forest over limestone, and forest over ultramafic rocks. So we may think that our forests are the same, but it's not actually the case. And you can imagine the impact that that kind of thinking will have when it comes to conservation, because there's no one fit solution to save all of the forests that we have. So for the living collections, each of our forest formation caters to a different set of species, and these are just some of the plants that can be found in the arboretum. Our mission is to, number one, protect and preserve our endangered Philippine plants, and number two, foster appreciation for the biodiversity through hands-on education and community involvement. So we have partnered with different scientists, and in fact, in 2019, we partnered with the UP Asian Institute of Tourism because as scientists, there's still, the difference between knowing which are easily accessible. We need to laymanize how we conduct our tours. So to be able to better serve the Filipino people, we underwent training in order to give more. So these are some pictures of our public engagements. And the next video is in partnership with the UP Asian Institute of Tourism, wherein we conducted um, a nature walk for more than 5 weeks back in 2019.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Gubat sa Syudad. It is one of the 5 thematic tour offered under the Lakad Gunita program. First and foremost, let me introduce myself. I am Kim.
This is the map of the UP-EEC Threatened Species Arboretum. So basically, we're here, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk around the Arboretum. So, ang gusto lang pong i-emphasize ng UP-EEC Arboretum is that in the Philippines, we have different kinds of forest formations. And according to Dr. Edwino Fernando, we have 12, but right now, EDC will be showcasing 5 of them. Not all forests are the same. Sa isang forest formation, iba yung makikita mo, tapos sa susunod, iba din.
Kinagat ito maasim.
So if you want a garden full of butterflies, you're gonna want to plant Leah. Also, so these are the flowers of Leah and the fruits.
So after the pandemic, what has changed? We see a lot of people that's become isolated from nature. And I've realized this year that nature shouldn't be a privilege that only a few people can access. We should bring it closer to the people, especially the kids. So what we have done for this year is that we've engaged in different activities, partnering with different institutions, especially Miss Isay Rodriguez. So the first part of our sun printing workshop was a 2-hour walk to inspire and have a lot of kids become more acquainted with our Philippine native plants. And after that, we did a sun printing workshop. So this is a very simple activity wherein you just paint a special chemical so that the paper will develop. And these are the results. So within just 10 minutes, you have these beautiful pieces of artwork. And then on the next month, Miss Isay Rodriguez was also a professor in the College of Fine Arts, and she was thinking of better ways for their output to become more impactful. And I said, why don't we collaborate? So she thought of the rainbow walk. This is a very interesting endeavor because what happened is that the students dressed up as the plant. So oftentimes our problem is that we can't showcase the plant fully because they're not in bloom. They're not as pretty. So what we made them do is to dress up in different colors. So we have uh, a plant depicting the red color, orange, yellow, green, all of the colors of the rainbow. And then our tour ended with the eucalyptus tree, which, if you're not familiar with, is the rainbow tree that is endemic only here in the Philippines, specifically in Mindanao. So these are the College of Fine Arts CWAT students. They created a characterized map that appeals more to the students, and this girl right here is participating in an activity wherein she tries to draw. So sometimes when we just visualize, when we just see a plant, we don't easily remember, or we don't get to digest the visuals. But when we draw it, we tend to remember it more. So that's what we did. And then for the next activity, Miss Celine tapped our institution. So we conducted the Likas Wika or poetry walk. Basically, what happened is she wrote a lot of poems depicting nature, and she asked the participants to read it. And then we also have an art workshop and urban nature walk in partnership with the 2030 Youth Force Philippines. This was organized by my good friend, Mr. Adrian Tobias. And then we also had a sensory nature walk. So basically, my realization is that everything I learned this year led me to create the sensory nature walk, which aims not only to empower the blind or the visually impaired, but also to coexist with them, to empower them so that they will co-create this nature walk. So we just did the first sensory nature walk back in July before I went on field work. And at first I was really scared because how are you gonna show something as beautiful if your participants can't see? But through working with them and them leading me on how should I do this, how should I do that, or what makes a plant interesting is that they have their odor. So even if they can see it, they can feel it, they can use their nose. So it was quite an experience, and I'm hoping to develop this more so that more people can participate. It's not the sensory nature walk isn't only for the blind, but we're also inviting people who can see. And I'm still navigating through what makes sense and what is acceptable to the blind community, because of course I don't want to offend them. And then for our impact and role after, because our arboretum is a part of field work. So when high school students go on field work, especially here in Manila, the first thing that they think of is our arboretum. And one joiner said that it makes it fun to engage. I'm not really a people person, so if you see me, I might not talk to you, but when I'm talking about plants, I become more talkative, and I'm happy that I get to make people appreciate plants more. So these are just some of the activities that we've done this year. And what really touches me is a young kid telling me that she wanted to be a naturalist because of the experience that she's had. So it's not really a problem. Plant blindness isn't a non-curable quote unquote disease. But if we really spend some time with the kids, sometimes they always see it. They pass by our arboretum, but because they don't know, they cannot appreciate what they see. So it's high time that people like me, or people who are, have the talent, the natural talent to communicate, to let people know, that especially the children, that plants aren't just plants. They're just not backgrounds for your selfie. They're here, they exist, and they play a special purpose. So if someone not like you doesn't, if someone like you cares a whole awful lot, it doesn't, can't get better. It won't. So this is an overview a drone shot of our arboretum. It's just a really small piece of land, but the impact that it has had with a number of students is different. So I'm encouraging everyone, if you have a piece of land, you can partner with us and with other artists. So I guess that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Abigail. Very nice presentation, and yeah, I'll put that on my list if I go to Philippines next time. Thank you for the appreciation, Kobe, Giselle, Ezirene, and Timna. I hope I mentioned that correctly. Okay, we are a bit over time, so we probably have time for one or two questions. Since anyone can raise hand or put something in the chat. And maybe before we go to the attendees, I am actually very curious, how do you measure your impact? Because it seems like you are open for feedback, comments, and so how do you measure your impact, and what are your metrics for the impact towards the society, if there are any?
That's actually a very good question. Like right now, aside from, the faces and the comments that we hear from the evaluation form, we haven't really um we haven't really measured yet what is our impact, like intangible terms, like like in percentage, has anyone really bothered to take on biology after going to our walk? So it's a difficult question for me to answer, but maybe you have a suggestion, because I'm really new with things like this, so I don't know how we can measure the impact that we've had so far.
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in biology, but I'm guessing maybe perhaps something to do with like starting from knowledge, as well as, I don't know how far you can go, like behavior perhaps, but that must be measured a bit later in time. But it would be interesting, like if you're working together with schools or universities, then you can follow up, like maybe 1 month after, asking the teachers from the school to survey students, because that's an idea. But I guess it might support you in getting, I guess, more funding and etc. If you can mention how far your impacts are. But thank you for that response.
Yeah.
I guess with the limited time, we will just do one more question. Is there a minimum required land area to develop an arboretum? And I guess that we can do the next question as well. Like, do you host all native species, or there are non-native species as well?
All right. For Ms. Zenaida's question, is there a minimum required land? If it's just for personal use or for your friends' use, there's no required land. But if you join networks like Botanical Garden Consortium Initiative, they will be requiring a minimum of 1 hectare, and then a number of plants that should be in your living collections. Now, do we host all native species? I wish, but we don't. Some of our native species are even lost. They haven't been seen. So no one no arboretum or even botanical garden can host all of our native species. But hopefully soon, maybe after 10 years.
Okay, great. Yeah, looking forward to the arboretum developing. And thank you, everyone. I guess because we're short in time, I guess we will end the Q&A to that. Thank you, Erica and Kobe and Giselle, for the appreciation. And we will move to the next speaker, which is Mr. Jet Scott Cruz from Department of Social Sciences, University of the Philippines, Manila. So time is yours. You have 10 minutes.
Ha- yeah, okay. A warm afternoon to all. I'm Jetscott Cruz, a development studies major from University of the Philippines, Manila. And this study is drawn actually from ethnographic commitment and exposure, working with urban poor leaders and households in my hometown. It is with the title, The Socio-Spatial Implications of Housing and Employment Mismatch, a mixed method case study of labor market outcomes and subaltern realities of households in Southville 8 peri-urban relocation site in Rodriguez, Rizal. The Philippines' level of urbanization is at 54% in 2020, and is anchored with urban sprawling. The peri-urban fringes in the Philippines have become sites of capital flows under the guise of the provision of the right to adequate housing. Against this backdrop of neoliberal urbanism, we first define what constitutes a peri-urban landscape in the Philippines. The figure shows the georeferenced research site. The green color is the phase 1 of the Southville 8, and the red color maps the phase 2, of which is the research site. As seen, Southville 8 is located at the outskirts of the urban core, Quezon City. It is in proximity to various crusher and quarry sites, and its economic activity is actually filled with informality. However, 15 years since its construction, and despite being one of the largest socialized housing projects in the Philippines, the area has not been fully explored. And in order to address these gaps, the general objective of the study is to analyze the socio-spatial implications of this housing and employment mismatch and its consequential effects on the labor market outcomes in the households of Southville 8 peri-urban relocation site. To accomplish this, it actually draws upon the spatial mismatch hypothesis of Kane, which was conventionally and initially defined as the discrepancy between where people live and where they work. However, with its limitations, it was further expanded by Wang et al. In 2022. Its now current connotator broadening includes the expansion towards the consequential effects to labor market outcomes. As such, the research design of the study adheres to a mixed method participatory approach geared towards the assessment of ground level issues against full-blown market-led urban planning. The phase 1 is the preliminary phase, of which the study employed a cluster random sampling. Phase 2 is the distribution of the interviewer administered surveys to 75 households in Southville 8 phase 1 and phase 2. And with the limited function of time, it only facilitated 5 key informant interviews and 1 focus group discussion. The analysis of data, of which statistical instrument is the one-way ANOVA, was also facilitated. And for the qualitative analysis, it was conducted using thematic content and discourse analysis. And finally, for the phase 4, it highlights the role of reporting back and sharing of knowledge, which is really essential towards decolonizing methodologies and our research when it comes to urban planning. We now move on with the key findings of the study. First, despite the location site being intended for disaster victims, the Southville 8 still sits in a disaster-prone area of the municipality of Rodriguez. As seen on these hazard maps, the Southville 8 has high to very high exposure to flooding, landslide, and even ground shaking. As such, it also did not pass the adequate structural code as prescribed by the National Structural Code of the Philippines. When it comes to the employment participation of households, all of the respondents with urban-based employment, especially those who work in Quezon City or Metro Manila, they're all part of the service sector. Most of them are drivers in various taxi companies in Metro Manila. When it comes to the respondents' employment in the municipality of Rodriguez Rizal or peri-urban based employment, most of them are saturated in the labor and construction industry. This can be attributed to the presence of various quarry sites, sanitary landfills, and crusher sites in the area. When it comes to the community-based employment, it includes the existence of various sari-sari stores, ambulant and street vendors, and other microeconomic enterprises located in their communities. This also covers the temporary employment undertaken by their barangay or other government agencies in the area. When it comes to look at their wages and earnings, households with urban-based employment have the highest monthly average income with only 14,540 pesos per month. This is only 240 $55 approximately. And if we're going to look at and contextualize these wages, the current average estimated poverty threshold in the Philippines is only at 12,082 pesos. With this threshold, the government will not classify a family of 5 if its income reaches this threshold. As such, many of the families and households were not counted as income poor. This makes poverty in the area rather invisible. If we're going to contextualize it and magnify it further, for households with urban-based employment, around 26.82% of their monthly income is allocated into commuting costs. This makes around 10,640 the income allocated to the needs of the households. This all in all magnifies the extent of the spatial mismatch endured by the relocatees in the area. With this little amount of earnings, households with urban-based employment also spend half of the time at work at 12 hours per day, or roughly around 3 hours were allocated for traveling. This leaves no time for other social family activities and community management in their area. To sum it up, the result of the one-way ANOVA reveals that there is a significant statistical difference between the overall perception of households with urban-based, peri-urban-based, and community-based employment in terms of labor market outcomes. This counters the state's attribution that there are no differences when it comes to the access of households in socialized housing projects in peri-urban fringes when it comes to essential social services. The results were further triangulated using qualitative analysis. Under neoliberal urban planning, many informal families were rescued from geophysical danger zones only to be relocated to social, political, and even cultural dead zones. As such, various victims of disasters were subjugated within the control of public officials, power brokers, and politicians who also pursue interests in real estate. And with the need to internalize the spatial mismatch, households resort to bed spacing near their place of work. However, this concept of bed spacing also leads to the concept of pangangaliwa in the Philippines, which is infidelity, in attempt to make sense of their already poor living conditions. And for even poorer households, as both family members have to go to metro cores to work, children are left on to fend for themselves. This leads to scavenging for food or even stealing for living. And apart from the social cost, capital expansion also exists through peri-urban dispossession. It has to be established that the overwhelming presence of quarry and crusher sites in the area means that the industry and market is growing. And as such, with capital expansion, the extension of market, raw materials, and labor in order to support the boom of the real estate industry at the expense of low-income relocatees becomes possible in the peri-urban, leading towards dispossession. In another lens, the social-spatial inequalities also highlighted the triple role and triple burden of community women in the area. The subaltern community women in the area stand in the line of fire from the reproductive to productive to even community management in the area. And as the informal market is where the employed women in South Bill 8 participates, some women in the community do manicure, pedicure, and even laundry services. And this all in all underscores how informality on its own is a form of contestation. This can be seen on how the mere presence of these micro practices foregrounds the coexistence of social-spatial injustices. And despite the homogenizing forces brought by urban sprawling, the capital expansion, the untenured and precarious employment, the everyday resistance of households towards their survival is a proof of the South Bill 8 households praxis. And it echoes our assertion that the right to the city begins at home. And as you can see here in the figures here, these are the participatory drawing workshop conducted in the community. And by drawing their notions of ideal homes, we can see how they try to reclaim their spaces and treat housing not just a mere commodity as a noun, but a verb as a continuing process. Home becomes, instead of being locally bounded by structure, becomes now an intersection of social relationship of an overall community. And to conclude, the study further contributes in the expansion of the spatial mismatch hypothesis to the mis- and malalignment of residential welfare and access to essential public services as experienced by Southville 8 households. And number two, the analysis of the labor market outcomes implies that even urban and rural development. And three, how space interacts with social structures and labor market reveals how spatial structures also transform the social structure in response to creeping urbanization process. And with women at the core of communities, this constitute an emancipatory force facilitated by a long-term politics of patience towards counterproduction and contestation of space. And for recommendations, greater attention should be put towards the dynamics of urban and rural dispossession, a need to blend the supporting elements for socialized housing projects to serve the needs of its occupants, and third, to improve the synergy between multi-sectoral, local, institutional, and national participation. And finally, there's also a need for other critical place-based approach and collective memory inquiry in other socialized housing projects to unfurl unique aspects of counter-narratives related to the counter-resistance of urban poor and other marginalized sectors. And I end my presentation to amplify our collective calls against social-spatial inequalities and regimes of dispossession as we march toward sustainable, decent, and sustainable housing. Thank you for the opportunity and mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jet. That was wonderful, and it's heartbreaking to see the results. And yeah, I guess that also echoes many of the peri-urban residents in metropolitan areas, also in Indonesia, where I'm from. Okay, so I'll be opening up the session to Q&A. Any questions? Okay, I'm wondering, since I'm not from a social science background, what is the spaces of hope that you refer to? What does that imply?
Yes. The spaces of hope, it's actually related to the politics long-term of patience when it comes to understanding. For example, there's a capitalist production in a certain location or area. It feels like it remains like you lose your hope in a certain area because you feel there's no access, there's no basic social services, there's no way to make sense of their already poor living conditions. However, with their everyday living situations, how to make sense of their realities, how they try to unfurl their difficulties in their everyday life, and how they try to make sense of their daily problems. For example, making sense of the ambulant vendors, making sense of making their day count. It's considered as spaces of hope and as anchored in long-term spaces of patience, because there's a sense of building your own community with certain people and with the own community of marginalized sectors towards understanding that there can be something, there could be done.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, so there's a comment from executive director of AUN. So
Yes.
yeah, I think it's good to emphasize the social dimension as well. Yeah, and in your participatory design workshop, I think it's to see that housing is translated as something more than physical, I think gives this social dimensions a bigger importance. Yeah. Great. So thank you, Jed. I guess we're approaching the break of the first session. So big round of applause for Jed and his presentation.
Thank you, Doc Cindy and Doc Delocad. Thank you so much.
So okay. So we'll have a break for the next 5 minutes. And we're around almost at the hour, so we'll meet 5 minutes after. So I think it's 3 p.m. 5 minutes in the Philippines and 2 p.m. in Indonesia. And then after that, we have a bit announcement for the Instagram Reel competition, and then we'll continue with the paper presentation. So see you in 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Okay. So we're at 5 minutes after. Okay, I guess we can try to continue with the next agenda, which is the Instagram Reel competition. This will be presented by Mr. Joshua Vargas as the president of the Young Urbanists of Southeast Asia, and Ms. Margarita Cristina Lagdel from the AUN-EEC Secretariat. So over to Kobe, I think, for the video recording.
Hey, what's up?
Where are we?
Where are we? We are at Rifle Range Nature Park in Singapore. Formerly a mining site, it has since been rewilded and is now part of a network of ecological corridors to connect wildlife, habitats, and people. It is also one of the few remaining places in the world where you can hear the beautiful birdsong of the straw-headed bulbul. Rifle Range is a conservation project that has immense value to Singapore residents as a place to unwind, relax, and exercise like I'm supposed to be doing now.
Who are you?
Who am I? My name is Joshua, and I am co-president of the Young Urbanists of Southeast Asia. Now, let me ask you a question, okay? Imagine your city rewilded. What would that look like? A design project, science-based policies, community programs and education? How would that make a better future for us, for our flora and fauna friends, and for the planet? In partnership with the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, or AUN-EEC, we are proud to launch the hashtag Rewilding the City Instagram Reels contest. In 1 minute, tell us how your city could look like rewilded. Be creative with how you tell your story. Live drawing, photo montage, animation, even a song and dance routine, as long as it's original content. Tag UC and AUN-EEC in your post and use these hashtags to qualify.
What's that on your collar?
Oh, this microphone? I don't know, I just wear it, like, totally not staged. Haha.
Yes. Oh, I think we have a second announcement. Okay, then, so we'll continue. Just because that went quite quickly, Kobe, perhaps if you are able to help putting in the hashtag that we are supposed to put in the Instagram reel competition so that people who wants to participate can do that. Thanks very much. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next presentation and this part 2 with Ezirain Joyce Ramos. I hope I announced that correctly, from the Bird Window Strike PH and Institute of Biology, University of the Philippines, Diliman. That is a nice institution that you're working with, Ezirain. So over to you for your presentation. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I hope the presentation is visible to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good day, everyone. I am Ezirain Ramos, part of Bird Window Strike PH and a student from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. I would present the preliminary status and drivers of bird window collisions in the Philippines. Urbanization poses threats to birds as more artificial structures are built. Although glass facades allow natural lighting and boost aesthetic appeal for people, these have proven detrimental to birds, especially at instances of high-speed collisions. Bird-window collision is the top 2 cause of bird mortality worldwide. It occurs due to perception failure, where birds cannot distinguish transparent or reflective glass panes as barriers and fly straight to them, causing injury or death. Literature from temperate regions of the world present estimates of average annual mortality due to window strikes, around 600 million in the US, 29 million in Canada, and 7 million in South Korea. Despite majority of bird species being found in the tropics, bird window collision studies in Southeast Asia have only been done in Singapore. This raises a huge knowledge gap on the status of BWCs in the Philippines, being a megadiverse country with high endemicity. The objectives were to first determine the magnitude and frequency of bird window collisions in selected buildings within UP Diliman and Ateneo de Manila University through building surveys, as well as nationwide through citizen science. Second is to assess the relationship between building and landscape characteristics and collision data. The study sites for building surveys were 24 buildings in UPD and 4 in ADMU. For citizen science, reports from the entire Philippines were collected. Data is collected for building surveys through first, direct survey, which followed the protocol that involved walking around the perimeter of each building twice a week from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., checking collision evidences within 3 meters, and 2, remote sensing via Google Earth probe. Citizen science data were obtained by active search using keywords, passive collection via messages and tagged posts, and remote sensing through QGIS and Google Earth Pro. Data analyses for building surveys included GLM to test relationship between collision data and variables. Model selection was done to select the best variable combinations that explain the data. For citizen science, point and DVI cover and elevation were extracted through QGIS, and graphs presenting great data summaries were created. These are the results of building surveys. From UPD, there were 9 collisions in 7 buildings involving 5 species. From ADMU, 4 collisions were recorded in 3 buildings involving 3 species. UPD and ADMU values were combined into one dataset. This slide shows the data summary per building parameter. Majority of collisions occurred in windows facing northward and southward. All windows where birds collided were reflective, and most were found on the 3rd floor of buildings. For landscape characteristics, the average distance to forest is around 30 meters. Majority of buildings with collisions had vegetation taller than 3 meters. Through GLM, we found that vegetation reaching windows, presence of grass, and presence of trees had significant negative relationships to collision data. This means that the greater likelihood that these variables are present, the less number of or less chance that collisions will occur. However, the direction of relationships in this study is opposite to those in published literature, like in a meta-analysis about collisions worldwide and a similar building survey study in Poland. The results for them are positive or directly proportional. In other words, more grass or more trees, more collisions. As of writing, there are no studies on bird window collisions that support the negative relationship. Together, building perimeter plus building area plus presence of trees were found to best explain the presence or absence of collisions, while only the distance to forest variable was found to best explain the number of collisions. There are no other studies yet that presents a similar combination, but individually, the results are well supported. Forest proximity is said to be one of the most important predictors of collisions in the Southeast Asian tropics. Moreover, the general trend is that collisions increase as building size increases. Notice that the presence of trees is both a driver of collisions and part of the best model, thus highlighting the importance of vegetation or green spaces in bird window collisions. This study provides the first documentation of bird window collisions in the Philippines. From 2013 to 2023, there were a total of 296 reports. 71 bird species from 32 families have been involved in window collisions in the country. Majority of these records came from Luzon. Across years, collision reports have increased and had a peak last 2021. This could partially be explained by expanded public awareness of Bird Window Strike Philippines since the page was established around November of that year. Peak number of collisions were observed during May and October. High collision count on October is similar to that observed in Singapore and Brazil, possibly due to the autumn migration where bird populations are expected to be highest. However, there were still more resident than migratory species that collided within these months. This peak in May could be explained by a prolonged breeding season, in other words, more inexperienced juveniles. Majority of collisions were reported during the morning. We could not say for sure that collisions actually happened in the AM because it might have occurred during the night, but the carcass only found the next day. Despite this, daytime collisions could be more rampant because it coincides with peak bird activity hours, like early morning. Now, what birds are involved? There's a large gap between the collision count for doves and the rest of the families. Doves and pigeons were the most frequent colliders, comprising 34% of the total reports, followed by kingfishers, pitas, coppersmith barbets, and Eurasian tree sparrows. In the species level, common emerald doves collided the most. This species actually took up 21% of all the total reports. Doves are the most high-risk taxa in studies from the tropics. Rapid flight, heavy bodies, and thin elliptical wings could have made them more susceptible. They also move between forest patches when foraging, thus encountering more obstacles along the way. For pitas, a possible cause for nighttime collision is blue light pollution. Barbets are forest edge-dwelling frugivores like doves. Lastly, sparrows possibly collide due to their elliptical wings. Threatened species become victims to window collisions too. This slide shows species of concern and their classifications on both local and international red lists. All except the night heron are endemic to the Philippines. This makes bird window strikes an even greater concern for biodiversity loss. More than half of window strike victims are residents, followed by 22%, which are endemics. Migrants are also affected, but in a smaller percentage. Initially, 46% of birds live after window collisions. However, 52% were observed to eventually pass away, showing that 5 out of 10 birds die after window collisions. This might be an underestimation, given that it is difficult to know what happens to birds that eventually fly after colliding, whether they fully experience their lifespan or eventually die due to internal injuries. Majority of collisions also occurred on the first floor of buildings. This is similar to US and Singapore data, where the most fatal collisions occurred at low-rise structures, less than 4 floors or less than 50 meters high. 56% of total collisions occurred at residential buildings. This is comparable, again, to US data, where majority of fatal collisions were reported from houses. NDVI shows that, in average, collisions occur in areas of sparse and moderately healthy vegetation. This is typical of fields and forests with low canopy density. For elevation, the mean is around 64 meters, possibly agricultural lands or residential areas. In this preliminary study, we may conclude that bird window collisions are a threat to birds or are frequent in 2 universities in Quezon City, Philippines, where some windows are sites of repeated collisions. The presence of vegetation and these being reflected by windows drove such collisions. And these were best explained by building size, forest proximity, and presence of trees around buildings. Nationwide data showed us that at least 10% of all Philippine birds are victims of window strike, where common emerald doves could be super colliders. 1 out of 2 birds eventually die after collision, most likely from internal injuries. Peak collision counts were observed during May and October, and generally occurred in areas of sparse vegetation and low elevations. Finally, threatened species are victims too, highlighting the importance of studying and actively working to prevent bird window collisions in the country. Bird collision fatalities present direct effects with identifiable solutions. How can we help prevent window strikes in our homes? Retrofitting can be done by putting decals on windows. Collisions were found to lessen significantly, up to 84%, when these decals are patterned approximately 10 centimeters apart, and 47% when films were applied on external window surfaces. These are the references I used. And report window strikes to us, and let's find solutions together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ezrain, for your very interesting presentation. As this is not specifically my domain, it's quite interesting to know that there are such a high number of bird collation and that many of them eventually die, that we're not doing anything like structural about it. And I would like to know more about, so you said there are a few, like there's that one dove that is a super collider, as you call it, and it might relate to their anatomy. Yeah, I think maybe this is also the question of Don Satumbaga in the chat. So how could elliptical wings be a factor that leads to collisions? I think that would be interesting to know.
Okay, so for the specific taxa, which are doves and also the sparrows, elliptical wings are commonly seen in birds that are forest dwellers because it is more applicable, or they use it for maneuvering inside forests with very narrow, for example, with very narrow spaces between trees. So for these taxa, especially the doves, since they forage in forests, and it could be a similar situation when they try to get through buildings that have narrow spaces. These elliptical wings, which should actually first and foremost help them with maneuvering the spaces, are not that effective when they cannot see the barrier in front of them. So even though they are more effective to maneuver the tight spaces in perhaps urban environments, the real problem actually is them not being able to distinguish the barriers as the glass as barriers.
Great, yeah, thanks for that. We have, we might have, yeah, time for one more question. So I'm wondering, that you have, yeah, the vegetation reach window, the presence of grass and the presence of trees, in reverse to what the literature is mentioning, right? So do you think, what other factors do you think that may be playing in that? Because I guess maybe it's maybe not directly because they have completely different relationships to other studies. I guess maybe perhaps there are effects of other factors that are stronger. I don't know how you see about that.
Well, we are also thinking of the sample size because actually we have a small sample size for the data analysis, so that could be one. But then also, when comparing this study in the Philippines to the study in, for example, the US or the temperate regions, we could also not directly align what's happening to the Philippines with what's happening to the US. Perhaps we found here that the relationship is negative, and since the majority of studies that we know are from the US are positive, and we think it's weird, but maybe in future studies when the duration of the future bird window collision studies are longer, we might actually be able to either strengthen this negative relationship, or perhaps we will observe a positive relationship that is similar to those in temperate regions. So that may be a thing of sample size, and it's both sample size and also not knowing if we should actually compare what is in the Philippines with the studies in the temperate region.
Okay, great. And I think we have a colleague of yours that are trying to respond to Erica's question regarding other initiatives, bird window strike. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I don't know if there needs to be a more systematic way, I guess, to prevent this, because if we rely on individual initiatives, I think it would be a lot, yeah, smaller impact, I guess, yeah. So thank you for that, Ezrain, for your presentation, and
Thank you.
thank you for the Bird Window Strike PH group that is also present here in this conference. And we'll move on to the next speaker, Patrice Bians Yapjoko, I think I pronounced that correctly, from the Agricultural Systems Institute, College of Agriculture and Food Science, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So you have 10 minutes and over to you.
Allow me to set up my screen for the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, please do.
Hello. There. Can I be heard?
Yes, you're good.
Is my
Yes.
presentation already on the
Yeah,
screen?
it's on.
So, good day to everyone. I am Patrice Bianca Ariapoco. I am a recently graduated BS Agriculture student from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, Laguna. And today I will be talking about agricultural extension in an urban informal settlement during COVID-19. And I will assess the effectiveness of the Tanimang Bayan initiative in Sitio San Roque, Quezon City. So it is quite interesting, to say the least, that we see the words agriculture or farming in an urban city, right? So for today's presentation, I will be breaking down the said title so that because it is quite a unique case study that has been my thesis during my undergrad. And what I did for this thesis is I viewed it as a qualitative study to highlight the narratives of the City of San Roque community. And I also viewed it as a case study so that because they were the only ones who were able to establish a farming system during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown as an urban informal settlement. So what is agricultural extension? For those who are unfamiliar, agricultural extension is knowledge and research on agriculture that is transferred or quite literally extended from theory to practice. And so this is how the extension happens. It is represented by models, which could be seen from the screen below. So the said phenomenon is when research systems are able to extend or successfully transfer new research or agricultural knowledge to our stakeholders, which is usually farmers. And so the said extension of research is represented by different types of models. This following model is what we call the traditional extension model. So where new research is extended from research systems such as NGOs, government agencies, or schools or research institutes to farmers. And historically in the Philippines, as you could see in the two images below, the earliest practice of agricultural extension was during the Spanish and American colonial period. So this is the Spanish period, but this is the American colonial period, where the church or the government would establish farmer settlement schools. And through experimental farming demonstrations, teachers and students would figure out how to plant on a wide scale level for crops such as rice, tobacco, and sugarcane to maximize profit and produce. And because most of these wild-scale farms are seen in rural areas or provinces in the Philippines, agricultural extension is rarely seen in cities or urban areas, where the environment is simply not conducive for farming due to the lack of agricultural or fertile land or the lack of access to farming resources such as fresh running water, fertilizers, and soil. And so This is most likely exacerbated in urban informal settlements, where they are deprived, these communities are deprived from basic economic necessities, such as a lack of stable access to electricity and also water and food, and also the transportation, since they are most of the urban informal settlement communities are informal, so they don't own their own land, they don't own their own basic necessities. And so the case of Sitio San Roque assumes that the urban environment, it is also the largest informal settlement in NCR, and it established community-wide farming under COVID-19 lockdown period. So it is quite interesting because Sitio San Roque, despite the unfavorable conditions, despite them having no access to any farming resources or even any basic necessities whatsoever, they were still able to establish farming. And why would they establish farming on such an non-conducive environment? So this is what the study would talk about. So Sitio San Roque has been not the largest, actually the largest urban informal settlement that has been long neglected from the Philippines' rapid and disoriented shift to urbanization. And so Sitio San Roque was first known during, it has been established during the end of martial law, because that was where poverty was at an all-time high in Quezon City. And one of the first residents in Sitio San Roque actually pursued farming in the city because they found it to be the land to be quite fertile. And so the urban informal residents, what they would do is they would start farming from what they would share to me. They would start farming. They would harvest their produce and then they would sell it along the streets of EDSA. And so Sitio San Roque has been in the mainstream news way back in 2009 because the sand land is actually owned by the National Housing Authority. But what the National Housing Authority did back in 2009 was they sold, unbeknownst to the urban informal settlement, which is Sitio San Roque, they actually sold the land to Ayala Land for a joint central business district in Quezon City. And so that has been the decades-long conflict of Sitio San Roque with the national office and Ayala and private developers. And so this is a map of Sitio San Roque, and this is, I would like to highlight here the gap between the private developers and the urban informal settlement. And so the said red line along these maps, the red highlighted area of the map, is actually what Ayala already owns, the private developer, and the said yellow line right here is Sitio San Roque. So they were actually way bigger before, but because of the conflicts between the private developers and the government, they have experienced attacks and harassment from police and private guards that is allegedly that works for Ayala. And so Sitio San Roque, during the first few months of the pandemic, they had no sustenance from the government, and they also reached news during 2022 because they staged a rally despite the lockdown period to heed their calls to the government to give them financial assistance or even donations. And so after protests, Sitio San Roque was provided with just limited cash assistance and food packs. And even during the lockdown, the said community faced harassment and attacks from both private guards and the police. And so this is the mainstream news. Sitio San Roque made it to the mainstream news from both the harassment from the police and private guards because they allegedly were breaking down lockdown measures. But from their stories, after immersing with the community, they have told me that they were really strict about it. They have become stricter, especially because there was prejudice against them being informal settlers. And so what the homegrown organization or the Kalipunan ng Damayang Maghihirap San Roque or Kadamay SR, they were able to mobilize the community to spearhead initiatives such as Kusinang Bayan, so that's the communal kitchen. And when they realized that they were not able to afford basic ingredients such as garlic and onion, they were able to make Tanimang Bayan. And Kusinang Bayan, up until this time, is no longer continued, but Tanimang Bayan is still continued. So they are still a continued farming system up until this day. And due to the inflation of ingredients, yeah, what I said earlier, they planted and harvested vegetables themselves. So how are they able to do it in an urban environment? This was their drive. Their driver or their main motivation was the rising prices of goods.
I'm sorry, just reminding that you have 1 more minute.
Oh no, sorry. Okay, so I would go through the presentation rapidly. So this is the said innovation during the lockdown period. So this is where stakeholders become their own agricultural extensionists. And so what they needed was knowledge and skills, because urban farming, even if a lot of residents were migrants from provinces, it is still not equated to rural farming. And how did they seek out knowledge? So what they did was they collaborated with fellow advocacy organizations such as SACA and UMA to get resources and training. But what also happened was the volunteers, when other residents were able to see that they established their own farm, other volunteers started developing interest. And when they started developing interest, they would exchange knowledge or agriculture extension, since it is quite fairly new in their community, urban farming. They would exchange knowledge through exchanging inputs, practices, and general farming advice. And that is when they would apply their own spin to it in their own respective households. So not only was Tanimang Bayan the only farm system, but all of the other residents who were quite interested were able to establish their own community gardens within their own household. And so here I would share some images of so this was the following knowledge that was shared. So it's been composting. All of it is organic farming practices, but it was unbeknownst to them prior to the Tanimang Bayan initiative. And so here is the Tanimang Bayan farm. And this was how they were able to secure, increase food security within their area. So this is the images of them in the farm. And this is all the other residents helping out, because what they would do is they would break down the concrete. So because the fertile land was quite covered in concrete. So there. And then they also reached mainstream news. And so what happened was, when they reached mainstream news, the government, the QC, Quezon City Local Government Unit, reached out to them and said, hey, I really like this initiative. It's gaining attention. And what happened was, when they were establishing the garden, guards or private guards from the alleged private developers would harass them, and they would be quite insecure. Like, their farm was very, very prone to demolition due to the private guards. But since the QC government was able to find out about the Tanimang Bayan farm due to the news, they would reach out through providing not only just resources such as agricultural inputs, but they would also provide security. So they would tell them that, hey, this land is for the City of San Roque residents, they need it. And what they would do, the City of San Roque residents, upon finding out, was they would increase the number of farming systems. They would expand to several other areas. So quite literally, not only was farming just for food security, but farming was also used as a means to reclaim their own space and land in an urban informal settlement. But this is what happened. This is one of their hindrances that they're facing today. So even as they expanded land, the private developers would still insist on claiming their own land. And recently, they established the Soler North, right up in Quezon City, right beside them, which is a hotel for the upper class. So that is what they're currently experiencing today. And these are their narratives, what they would do, what the guards would do to harass them. So you are required, they would take pictures of your house, they would question you unprovokedly. They would also, so what they're not allowed to, what the residents are not allowed to do is to bring their own building materials, because the guards would think that they are settling down in the urban informal settlement. So what they would do to persist on continuing farming was they would get makeshift ropes and they would use them as hanging tools for the plants to grow in. So the vines such as upo, they would use that, or ampalaya, they would use it to what is ampalaya? But bitter gourd there. They would use it to they would use ropes to hang onto the plants. But what they would do, even if they would make makeshift planting tools, is they would cut them off, the guards, without any warning. There, so they would take down even some of the households, they would take down their farming, they would take down their farming sites. But since now, because this is quite a new case, with the City of San Roque extension model, farming was seen as a means of delaying, not stopping, but delaying urban development aggression, because they were able to reclaim their space through the Tanimang Bayan sites. And farming was also seen as a means of reclaiming urban housing justice, as they were able to reach their advocacies through mainstream news. And so this is how I represented the said new extension model, and this is the traditional extension model. This is quite cyclic and more sustainable, since they are still doing it until this day. So this is what I would like to close this presentation by saying what the Tanimang Bayan leader persisted on saying here. So the efforts of many should not be disregarded, despite the multiple attacks and harassment from the police and private developers. Thank you. So please save San Roque, since the conflict is still ongoing, and no to development aggression. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I went over time.
No, you're fine. Okay. Thank you, Miss Yapjuko. And yeah, I think those are very interesting findings, how they are really attached with the agricultural extension activity. So I will open the question and answer to the audience. If not, I would like to know more about the community that you are working with. When you mentioned knowledge retention at some point, and it's also in your abstract. So how important is that to places with conflicts? Because I guess sometimes forgetting is also what governments depend on for these kinds of like violent conflicts. Yeah, I'd like to know more on that.
So in terms of knowledge retention, that has actually been highlighted by the residents themselves, because as the said land is managed under the National Housing Authority, and it has been a decades-long conflict, there have been already many batches of leaders that have come and go, and what the behavior that they observed from the National Housing Authority would have been through their meetings, their many meetings with the new leaders. They would tend to forget about it, and they would tend to say that it is not their problem anymore, since it happened to the latter batch, that they would tend to turn a blind eye on these issues, since that was not under the said management right now. And so that is why they have resorted to endlessly rallying and endlessly putting their advocacies out there on the mainstream news or alternative news. And that is also why they wanted to continue the farming initiative up until this day, because it served as a statement for them to uphold resilience against development aggression. So it is very, very important to them, even if their farm grew big, and even if they also right now have had like a decrease in farming sites, big and small, they still really wanted to pursue it. And actually their number of volunteers have decreased from over 34 during the pandemic, but right now their volunteers have decreased to only on 5 or 6, but they're still very insistent on continuing the said initiative so that people won't forget that they have shown that they are productive citizens despite them being informal settlers in the Quezon City.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting to see the persistence of the community. And yeah, I think with that, we will close this presentation. And thank you, Patrice, for the wonderful insights. And we'll move on to the next presenter, Ethan Joshua Camingao from Department of Computer Science, University of the Philippines, Diliman. This time on quantifying air pollution. So over to you, Ethan. You have 10 minutes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, that's great. Good day, everyone. My name is Ethan Joshua Camingao, and on behalf of my lab from the Department of Computer Science of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, I will be presenting our research entitled Quantifying the Relationship of Tree Quantity to PM10 Concentrations, a case study for urban areas in tropical environments. Now, without further ado, so the main motivation of our research is actually taken from the September 2023 volcanic smog that came from Taal volcano. However, after looking into it, it really wasn't volcanic smog, but rather regular smog from carbon emissions within the metropolitan area. Now, with this and with the lockdowns easing from the COVID pandemic, it's really vital to look into other ways on how we could improve air quality in the metro city. So, our study is focusing on trees as a factor that could help improve air quality, specifically PM10 pollutants within the city. So, this is the methodology that we decided to take for our study. So this is divided into three main parts, which is the data collection, the pre-processing of the said data, and finally, analysis with geographically weighted regression. Just to visualize our data collection, most of all of our AQI data was obtained from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And we decided to take 3 time periods for our AQI data. As you can see here in this map, these are the air quality monitoring stations that we are looking at. And we have the average PM10 AQI data collected from these 3 time periods: before the smog, during the smog, and after the smog, which corresponds to August, September, and October, respectively. So for August, however, we do have 2 blank spots. This was because the monitoring stations at that time were offline. Hence, we have no data for these dates. Now, for the tree collection is actually a combined effort of our CWTS students from the Department of Computer Science and us researchers. We were able to count around approximately 160,000 trees around Metro Manila area. But in the interest of our study, we will only be focusing around the trees within a 600-meter radius of each of the air quality stations mentioned. These are the corresponding number of trees around each station. When it came to pre-processing the data, we needed to create a continuous PM10 AQI layer. To do that, we use the Kriging-Gaussian model. And this is our generated results for the 3 time periods. And as you can see, during the September period, it really had a bad air quality. And our values range from 76 to 15. And the white numbers you see here are the corresponding station IDs, as mentioned earlier. Uh, so another pre-processing step that we decided to take was to identify hotspots and cold spots within the AQI data and the tree dataset. So with this, we use spatial autocorrelation, and these are our generated results. Now, it is important for us to take the hotspots and cold spots because from this, we will be able to identify additional points to be included in the geographically weighted regression in the analysis part. Now, from the spatial autocorrelation, we were able to identify hotspots and cold spots both in the air quality data and the tree quantity data. So as you can see here, these are the hotspots or cold spots for the air quality points, and these are the hotspots for the tree quantity points. So these are the additional interpolated points that we will be including in our study. And just to note, station ID 14 and 15 is only limited to the September period. And again, this is because the September period exhibited more hotspots compared to the other time periods. Now, from the pre-processing, let me just quickly introduce what GWR or the analysis that we did. Now, geographically weighted regression, it is a spatial analysis technique that is used to explore and model the relationships between a dependent variable and the independent variable, accounting for spatial variability, which is not available to the normal regression. We believe that it was appropriate for our study, and we will see that later in the results. Now, to incorporate the GWR analysis, we had to use a Python module with the independent variable being the tree count and the dependent variable being the average PM10 AQI. Now, once again, these were the methodology steps that we took in our research. And finally, for the results, we decided to test how accurate the GWR analysis was. And here in the R-squared values, we can see that the GWR provides a better fit because of regression has a really low R2 square, and it would not provide a good fit for this study. Hence, the GWR was the right. As I show the numbers, meaning the lower the value, the better the results. While tree quantity is an upper bounded interval. To express the results clearly, we decided to set them both to be an upper bounded interval. Now, these are the numbers that we were able to generate with the GWR analysis. Now, as you can see here, the independent variable or the tree quantity in this case, it increases. As it increases, the independent variable or air quality also increases. This indicates that there is a positive relationship with the number of trees towards PM10 or towards air quality. Now, these are the generated GWR parameters around each of the stations. And this is the zoomed in version of that. So as you can see here, the green boxes indicate a positive outcome, while the red boxes indicate a negative or neutral outcome. And to further this, we decided to look at what kind of economic activities or is happening within these station IDs. So we were able to find out that most of the green or most of the positive areas were high to low residential density areas, and commercial business and government and quasi-public areas were shown to have a negative correlation with trees. Now, these are our results, and for our conclusion of this study, um, the impact of trees is generally positive, which is good because that's what we were hoping for, but it's not actually constant across Metro Manila. And if we want to put a number, which is the real goal of our study, the tree quantity affects the dependent variable by around 0.003. So it's not a lot, but it's positive. So it's going in the right direction. But to further this study, our future recommendations excuse me, to obtain more AQI data points or to add more interpolated points. This will provide a more accurate analysis with the regression model. Additionally, I think it is important to investigate areas where the relationship between tree quantity and air quality is neutral or negative. And finally, we think that it's not only trees that affect air quality. So looking into other factors such as traffic, economic activity is also a next step for this study. And I guess that concludes our research. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ethan, for your presentation and very relevant to the issues of air pollution in urban ASEAN areas. Before we jump to maybe questions that the audience perhaps would want to ask, I'm wondering, so you depart from the assumption that that higher tree quantity means lower air pollution, I guess, right?
Yes, that's right.
And then that's how you calibrate your model. I'm just wondering, is that assumption challenged in one way or another? I mean, that is the basis of your model, but the hypothesis itself, is it like 100% firm, or are there actually, well, like with primary data measurements, instances where it is actually a negative relation, for example, or are no effect? Yeah, I don't know if that's clear enough.
Uh, well, Doc Cindy, to address that question, and thank you for that question. Our data was, I think, in terms of AQI data, it was severely limited. And although we were working towards the assumption that tree quantity improves air quality, going through the regression model, we did come up with some negatives indicating that the more trees there were, it actually didn't affect air quality in a good way. So perhaps we don't want to I think it's too early for us also to conclude that trees affect air quality negatively. So that is why in the recommendations we included maybe there are other factors other than just trees that affect air quality in those areas. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And because you're working a lot with like visual or spatial data, is there plans for working on other land use or maybe activity data that can be obtained through satellite imaging, for example, house density, which I don't know, could be somehow correlated with like the car use, yeah, things like that, and which I think in the urban area would be highly relevant. Yeah, over to you.
Yes, there has been talks of including more satellite data, such as night lights or the land use types of Metro Manila. However, given the limited time that we have to conduct this thesis, we had to limit it to one factor alone, and we decided to focus on trees for this run of this research. Perhaps future researchers might look into that. Uh, that's all.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ethan. I hope the model can be, yeah, more developed and implemented widely because I think it's very important. Okay, so with that, we'll close Ethan's Q&A and we'll move over to the next presentation. Mansawi Obinay from Department of Filipino and Other Languages, Mindanao State University main campus. Over to you.
So, Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Nirjana A. Laksaman, the presenter and the co-author of this research along with Mansawi Ubinay and Naimang Makatanong. So the title of our paper is the climate change is in the context of news, a critical analysis of the text. So this paper highlights the urgency and importance of addressing climate change in today's society. It could discuss how the media plays a crucial role in shaping public perception and understanding of climate change through the narrative presented in the news article. So by critically analyzing this text, we aim to uncover the underlying biases, trend, and implication for how climate change is portrayed in the media. This presentation will dive into complexes and how news coverage influence public attitude and action toward climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy. So climate change is a fact that is once again plugging into our world. Long-term changes in temperature and weather, primarily driven by human activities since the 1980s, have and had profound effect on our planet. In the Philippines, there are two weather that can be experienced, either dry season or rainy season, that cause flooding in the places. And in our time today, we can say that climate change is experienced because of the wrong practices of our people. Only a few of the reasons for this are the burning of plastic and fossil fuel, the smoking coming from vehicle, improper garbage disposal, and cutting down trees. So, in other words, climate change is a phenomenon resulting from human misconduct. In order to minimize its misconduct, it is sufficient to reason and read news context relating to climate change and thus mislead a person and go to the wrong places he is accused to. So the method, this study utilized qualitative method that aims to explore the dramatic changes in news about climate change in news context. In addition, the study utilized convection by Aaron Stibet to interpret and categorize whether the news context is truth, perspective, and belief. The study used context analysis to understand and evaluate climate change in news context. By analyzing the news context relating to climate change before analyzing the existing text and assessing them by embezzling truth, perspective, or belief. So the reason identifying in the news analysis about climate change is first the eco waste or ecological waste can significantly impact climate change due to its contribution to greenhouse gas emission. When organic waste such as food scrap, yard trimming, and product decompose in landfill, they release methane, a, a potent greenhouse gases that is much more effective in trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. Second, the charcoal making. So charcoal making can impact climate change in several ways. One significant factor is the release of carbon dioxide during the process. So when wood and organic materials are heated in the absence of oxygen to produce charcoal, carbon is released into the atmosphere in a form of CO2. This carbon dioxide contribute to the greenhouse effect, trapping heat in the Earth atmosphere and leading to global warming and climate change. Third, the improper waste disposal. So the improper waste disposal can have a significant effect, impact on climate change due to the release of greenhouse gases and other harmful substances into the environment. So when organic waste such as food scrap and yard trimming is disposed of landfill with a proper management, it undergoes anaerobic decomposition, leading to the production of methane gas. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas that is much more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, contributing to its global warming and climate change. Lastly, is the dirty water. Particularly polluted water body like river, lake, ocean can contribute to climate change through various mechanisms. One significant way in which dirty water affect climate change is through the release of methane and carbon dioxide from decomposing organic matter in water bodies. When pollutants such as sewage, industrial waste, and agricultural runoff contaminate water source, they provide an of nutrients nutrients to algae and other microorganisms. As as these organisms decompose, they release methane and carbon dioxide. So both putting greenhouse gases that is contribute to global warming. So in result, in table 1, you can see change. So first, according to the Philippine Statistic Authority or PSA, between 2010 and 2019, extreme weather event in the Philippines caused 463 billion in damage with 62.7% or approximately 290 billions of each damage to the agricultural sector. So we identify this paragraph as true. Uh, Second is the unestimate 437 million to 8.3 billion plastics are being washed up the coastal line worldwide. In the coastal area of America, approximately 7.5 million plastic are piled up, and even the leader there are troubled by the garbage being washed ashore. So we identify these as true. So uh, number three, electronic waste or e-waste add, adds to the litter of the environment, and some of them have components that can harm nature. That's why it's better not to just throw away or leave these kinds of trash or broken equipment scattered around. So according to the convention, we identify this paragraph as perspective. So there are many example that there are many choosing example that we identify in the news about climate change. So in conclusion, the analysis revealed that news context sparks various speculation about climate change. Data from diverse news sources emphasize the significance of addressing climate change on a broad scale. It is evident that journalists use fact, uncertainties, and inaccuracies to convey message about climate change. Truthful reporting stands out as the most reliable and impactful method to communicate the effect of climate change. It, it is crucial to recognize that climate change profoundly affect both our environment and the society. So thank you for listening, and again, have a good day, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much for the interesting presentation. And it's unfortunate that she cannot join us here today. So I guess we won't have a Q&A session for that. And we'll move to the last but not least, I guess, presentation for the day, the role of urban green spaces for physical activity in urbanized area, which will be also through video, I think. From Triza Jasmine Tai from the College of Human Kinetics, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Good afternoon. I am Trisha Jasmine T, and I am here today to present to you this study on the profiling of physical activity usage in selected urban green spaces. My fellow co-authors and I are from the College of Human Kinetics from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. So first, I have a question for you. Where do you often exercise? The answer may be at the gym, or even at home or at the studio with the class. However, there is a space for you that you can freely use just in your communities, and these are the public urban green spaces. So these spaces are places for humans to use and for leisure, recreation, and various physical activity. It has often been developed in order to conserve the nature and environment around it. So, these urban green spaces play a critical role in facilitating physical activity. They provide opportunities for various exercises, activities for all kinds of people. So, it has been found in multiple studies that the characteristics of these parks, gardens, and other urban green spaces has been associated with the type of physical activity being done, the intensity level, if it's sedentary, moderate, or vigorous, as well as who uses the space. Are they children, female, male, etc.? So did you know that 27.5% of adults all around the world are physically inactive? This 2016 statistic has held true even until 2022. And that this just goes to show that urban green spaces are important in the role they play in providing opportunities for physical activity. So now let's ask the important questions. How do people use urban green spaces specifically for physical activity and recreation? What do these urban green spaces look like? And where are these urban green spaces and how did they become what they are today? So we were able to find out the answers to these questions through an interview and an observation. So the interview was with the former Assistant Chief Cecilia Serrero of the Marikina River Park Authority, who has worked there for over 2 decades, and architect Ralph Espinosa, the officer in charge of the recent redevelopment of the Marikina Heights Park Complex. Uh, the, the system of observing play and recreation in communities, or the SAW Park, by Mackenzie in 2000, from 2006, was used in order to observe the physical structures or the built environment and natural environment in the urban green space, the user demographics or who uses the park, as well as the park-based physical activity. So this observation was done 4 times a day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 4 times a week for 2 weeks. So it was done 1 week for each park. So what is it that we found? All right. So first, here is the Marikina River Park, the first selected urban green space. There were 3 areas identified as key areas here, which is the Riverside Road, the Roman Garden, and the Roman Garden Gazebo. As you may be able to see in the picture, the Riverside Road has a long cement road that connects it to other places. Not seen here is a makeshift basketball hoop, open for use for anyone, as well as various bike rental kiosks and vendors. Area 2, or the Roman garden, is a grassy area with many trees and benches and tables. And lastly, the Roman garden gazebo, this white structure here, has a cemented area that is open for use. Next, the Marikina Heights Park Complex has 4 areas: the Gazebo Park, Area 1 has a big gazebo and multiple seating areas. Area 2, the Grotto Park picnic area, has tables and chairs, winding pathways, a grotto with a statue, bike parking, and many other area improvements. Next, Area 3, the playground, also has tables and chairs, but also includes a swing set, a playground set for children to use. And lastly, Area 4, or the Evolution Park, includes benches, monkey bars, a senior exercise station, and a cemented area that is multi-purpose. So these areas during the observation period was found to be usable, accessible, and usually well lit, even at night. It was rarely found empty, and this was often connected to it due to being the night or due to recent rain. All right. So, what was the purpose found for these urban green spaces? Why were they built? Why were they developed? So, it was found through the interviews that they are meant to meet the human needs. First, the access to healthy and natural environment through the preservation and conservation of the areas around it. Next is the personal development by providing opportunities for physical activity in order to improve an individual's health and wellness. And lastly, through community development by providing areas for socialization, gatherings, organized activity, and rest. What did we find? What trends did we find as we observed during the observation period? Well, first there was a total of 6,948 videos, 3,040 in Marikina River Park and 3,908 in the Marikina Heights Park Complex. It should be noted that the Marikina Heights Park Complex was more recently developed. By gender, there were more male visitors than female, and by age, the majority of the people there belong to the age group of teenagers, followed by adults, and then children, and lastly the elderly. It can be noted that during the interview that the Marikina Heights Park Complex was more recently developed to include a playground and a senior exercise station. Previous findings have found that certain built environment features promote physical activity in specific groups. However, which the playground caters to, and elderly, which the senior exercise station caters to throughout the observation period, it was observed that they were being used in multiple activities, varying activities, and these are also the biggest areas available. It was observed that 3:30 p.m. was the time with most visitors, mostly composing of children and teens, and often observed to be students wearing sports shoes. It can be noted that 3:30 p.m. is the time when students get out of class. So these parks are found to be connected to schools, commercial establishments, and other commercial areas where children and teens often pass through in order to get to different places. And 7:30 p.m. was found to have the least amount of visitors. Visitors were mostly in groups of families, friends, and classes of organized activities. It's also notable to note that schoolmates or even group works are often observed here in the area, not just physical activity group works, but as well as craft projects and planning sessions as well. So this connection to schools and commercial areas shows that urban green spaces provide connectivity from different parts of the community. So let's talk about the physical activity of the visitors in the urban green space. In total, there were 3,589 active individuals, or more than 50%, and only 3,359 sedentary individuals. However, it is notable that the active individuals are composed of both the moderate and vigorous physical activity observed. So the largest group of individuals are mostly sedentary, followed by moderate and vigorous. Why is it that sedentary and active and physical activity are so close to each other? This can be observed through how the area improvements in the urban green space cater to both community development and personal development through physical activity. So, community development encourages social gatherings, even eating in the picnic area, for example, as well as socialization and rest from physical activity, while personal development area improvements such as exercise stations, the playgrounds, etc., contribute to the use of the urban green space for physical activity. Here you can see the different areas with the most physical activity. So Gazebo Park is notable to be a multi-purpose area. It's an open space that have no specific built environment for physical activity, but it allows a wide variety of activities, including organized physical activity classes. So here it was observed Taekwondo classes to have taken place, as well as dance practices for different groups. Next is the Marikina Heights Park Complex Area 3, or the playground. The playground specifically caters to children, and children are often been found in previous studies to be encouraged by unstructured play. So the playground encourages this unstructured play and provides a safe place for them to do so. It is notable to mind that the flooring for this area is soft soft rubber granules, which provide a safe environment for the children to play. Next is the Marikina Heights Park Complex Area 4, or the Evolution Park. The Evolution Park has multiple areas specific for physical activity, including exercise bars, monkey bars, and exercise stations. And lastly, the Riverside Road is another multi-purpose open space that can be used for various activities. So it should be noted that park visitors often bring their own equipment such as volleyballs, badminton rackets, or other things to freely use in the park space. That's why multi-purpose areas are so important. Additionally, specific area improvements cater to specific demographics such as the playground and the exercise station in the Evolution Park. So these cater to children and seniors as well as other adults and teenagers. While the Riverside Road and pathways promote biking and walking specifically. So what are the types of physical activity most common to be observed? First of all, there is walking. So walking is the most common, followed by biking, as well as surprisingly dancing. So walking and biking was mostly observed in in all of the areas, through the pathways, and even through just trees and the grassy areas as well. So these open spaces allow people to freely walk and bike, and the connection of these urban green spaces to other commercial establishments in the community, as well as to residential areas, schools, and more, encourage people to use active transport such as walking and biking, and the specific pathways and biking areas for people to get to and from places. Lastly, the surprising thing is dancing, in which it was observed that student groups, usually classmates or maybe even group mates, often practice for school activities, such as Filipino dances and more. Our niece was also observed to be observed during their practices, as well as there was also Zumba classes as well. So the only vigorous activities noted here was running or playing by the children mostly, taekwondo, an organized activity, basketball, calisthenics, vigorous biking, and jogging as well. So out of 14 activities, only 5 were found to be vigorous, contributing to the small percentage of vigorous physical activity observed. There were also organized physical activity found occurring, including Taekwondo and Zumba. Taekwondo was mostly found to be catered to children and teenagers, and these were specific classes during a specific time period in the multipurpose areas. Next, there is Zumba, which caters to mostly females and adults and the elderly, which are a few of the least observed demographic in the urban green space. So Zumba can be found to encourage females specifically, and seniors as well as older adults to participate in physical activity. So Zumba usually occurs in the morning and comprises largely of the 7:30 a.m. observation period. also be noted that Zumba classes often also gather and eat together in the picnic area after their class. After all of those findings, let me present to you a summary and conclusion. So urban green spaces are often are often developed and used for the purpose of personal and community development for the local community, in addition to the conservation of the natural environment. The characteristics of these different parks, including the built environment, the existence of exercise stations, exercise bars, playgrounds, and pathways, and more, encourage park visitors to participate in various activities, both physical and sedentary. Certain built environment and organized activities such as taekwondo and zumba encourage specific demographics. However, it is notable that few elderly and children visit and use the urban green space despite there being built environments specifically for them. And there are also very few opportunities for vigorous physical activity. However, overall, urban green spaces can truly be seen to provide a great opportunity for members of the community to participate in physical activity, seeing as there are actually more physical active individuals observed in the park than sedentary. It is also, of course, a great place to rest and socialize, as well as exercise together with your friends, family, and even schoolmates. Moving forward, I think that we recommend that there should be more improvements targeted toward encouraging the elderly and children specifically, which is the least observed demographic. The improvements There should also be more improvements providing opportunities for vigorous intensity physical activity, such as the exercise bars that encourage calisthenics, and even the roads or bike pathways to encourage more vigorous biking. It is also important to increase the connectivity of the community through active transport. As you can see, walking and biking were the most common types of physical activity. And this can even be further encouraged through the improvement of active transport infrastructure both inside and leading towards the urban green space. This can even encourage people to go towards the urban green space to actively use it for recreation or physical activity. And lastly, the implementation of similar initiatives, programs, and policies to the development of urban green spaces in other urbanized cities, not just in Marikina City, can be critical, as urban green spaces provide important opportunities, and encourage physical activity among the members of the community. Uh, in using natural and the beautiful environment that is available to us and developing them to include a built environment in a way that provides a healthy and open space for the public to use, even inside crowded urbanized cities and areas such as the metro. So that is all I have to say to you today. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I can't be there with you live as uh, I, ex- I can't be there with you live. However, if you have any questions, you can email me at Trisha Jasmine T. That's TRIZAJASMINTY at gmail.com, or find and connect with me on LinkedIn. So I hope this was interesting to you all as it was interesting for me to study, and I hope the next time you walk by a park, maybe you can stop, sit down, maybe jog a little, or even try out the exercise equipment. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.
Great. Yeah, that was wonderful. Also interesting to see that besides walking and jogging, that people are running, are dancing. I think that's a really great option for physical activity in urban area where you have a lot of people to dance with. So okay, I guess with that we have come to the end of our session, and so I thank all of the speakers for your really insightful presentations and bringing us around the world or around ASEAN, in different arboretums, different cities, and yeah, it gives interesting insights on how many of the challenges that ASEAN countries are facing are similar to one another, and that we must collaborate closely to achieve the aim of rewilding the city, and I think it's a goal that should be close to our hearts. And so with that, I will sign out, and we'll leave the floor for closing from Dr. Emmanuel Delgado for the conference synthesis. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just remembered I should be, before we go to the closing, sharing the evaluation form. Oh no, it is closing remarks first. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, so we'll move to the conference synthesis from Dr. Emmanuel De Luca.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you find our conference enjoyable and exciting. On behalf of the Conference Secretariat, I would like to thank you for joining us in our fifth AUN-EEC conference on ecological education and culture. In this fifth conference, the theme was Rewilding the City. In the plenary session this morning, our moderator, Dr. Nikki Carsi Cruz, shared that the banner theme of AUN-EEC this year is urban sustainability. Earlier this year, we learned about the tensions in the city through our webinar. These tensions are cultural preservation versus modernity, environmental protection versus economic progress. Despite these tensions, there are intentions to live sustainably in and with the city. We hope that through the keynote lectures this morning, you had some appreciation of the environment and culture and how they can continue to thrive in the city. We thank Dr. Maxine and Dr. Rohaya for being champions of the different but very interrelated facet of urban sustainability. The panel discussion provided us a glimpse on the different champions' contexts and challenges in mainstreaming sustainability in Southeast Asian cities. We learned some nuances of the solutions being presented. And we learned that rewilding the city is not just about greening the city. It is about building systems and structures that would enable practices to contribute to building a culture of sustainability. Meanwhile, the afternoon session caters to our personal interests. Through the four sessions, we hope that you had some appreciation of the diversity of how we, individuals from various fields, ranging from natural sciences to education, humanities to engineering, and everything in between, can contribute to rewilding our cities. Special thanks to Dr. Cindy Rianti Priadi for moderating the session, and to Mr. Kovi Angeles for providing technical support for the session. As we end the conference, we hope to see you in our upcoming events. I invite everyone to participate in our Instagram Reels competition, which was launched earlier, and our city planning workshop competition happening later this year. Also, to our presenting authors, you may opt to submit the full paper of your presentation so that this can be considered for publication in the special issue of CSID Journal of Infrastructure Development. CSID JID is abstracted and indexed in DOA AJ, Crossref, Garuda, WorldCat, Cinta, and Scilit. You may submit your papers until the end of September, and the Secretariat will also send you an email on this after the conference. Lastly, before we end, we would like to request you to evaluate the conference by clicking the link on the chat or by scanning the QR code that will be flashed shortly. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Great. That was a nice closing. And yeah, I think that's highly relevant to our session where we talk a lot about the system and about the social aspect as well as physical aspects of rewilding the city. So with that, I would like to invite everyone to turn on your camera for a group picture, if you don't mind, and if you're still around. So we'll have one last picture. Oh, we have Bwayomi here. We just joined us. I think she finished our session. Bwayomi is the chair moderator for the third parallel session, I think. Okay. And also thanks for other colleagues from University of Philippines, Baguio, and also we're here, and all the students and graduates for making it. And of course, thank you to Dr. Manuel for organizing this very wonderful opportunity to meet and learn about all these studies. Okay, so I guess, Kobe, over to you for a group picture. Will you give the cue to us to make sure we're smiling on the right second?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cindy. All right, so everyone, so I encourage you all to please turn on your cameras. Let's wait for a bit for the others. We have 2 pages, so I'll just ask everyone to keep smiling for a bit. All right? All right, I think we can start. Okay, so there we go. Oh, all right. May nakahabol. All right, some people are able to catch up. All right, so everyone smile for page 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and for page 2, please remain smiling. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you, Dr. Cindy. Back to you.
Great. Okay. And with that, we'll close off the session. And thanks again, everyone. And yes, please don't forget to fill in our evaluation form. And also, yes, I was just gonna mention if we can also have it posted in the chat for everyone to click on. And yes, and good, happy continuation for everyone who's still working on their research and their work. And for the recent graduates, good luck to your next phase of life. And thank you so much for this opportunity. Bye, everyone. Signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Cindy, for moderating the session. And thank you, everyone. Congratulations to all the presenters.
Thank you.